Tonight, our special transmission, as the dead in Gaza are also not spared from the brutality of Israeli forces. Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Muslim News Canada on Muslim Network TV. I'm Zahra Sayed. Today is the 118th day since Israel started its indiscriminate war on Palestine. Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza has also reported the killing of 105 Palestinians overnight in Israeli strikes. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has announced an expansion of the military offensive into the southern city of Rafah. Previously, the Israeli forces had declared the area as a safe zone. Rafah is a home to nearly 1.9 million displaced Palestinians. The United Nations Humanitarian Office has expressed deep concern about the situation in Rafah. It is calling the area a pressure cooker of despair. Israeli jets have launched aerial attacks in southern Lebanon and inside Syria. 3 pro-Iranian fighters are reported to have been killed in Israeli strikes south of the Syrian capital, Damascus. The death toll of Palestinians now stands at 27,019. Another 8,000 Palestinians are considered dead under the rubble. 66,139 Gazans have been injured. Israel's revised death toll from Hamas's attacks stands at 1,139. Israeli officers are allegedly instructing their troops to set fire to Palestinian homes in Gaza without legal approval. Israeli newspaper Haaretz says over the past month, soldiers have destroyed several hundred buildings in this manner. Haaretz sources suggest that burning homes has become a common tactic. It says one battalion is giving explicit instructions to prepare homes for arson. Some Israeli soldiers have posted videos on social media, labeling their actions as revenge for Israeli casualties. Satellite data indicates that up to 61% of Gaza's buildings have been damaged or destroyed. Legal experts are terming this widespread destruction as domicide, a crime against humanity under international law. United Nations Rapporteur Balakrishnan Rajagopal says such actions render entire areas uninhabitable for civilians. On the other hand, the Israeli army says all building destruction in Gaza is officially sanctioned. It has promised to investigate any unauthorized acts. Israeli forces are not sparing even the dead in the besieged Gaza Strip. Incessant attacks by Israeli forces are leading to piles of bodies and hurried burials in hospitals and a UN-run school. The forces have also reportedly dug up bodies. The Tafat district in Gaza City is witnessing shrouded Palestinian corpses removed from their graves laid atop muddied earth. The Ministry of Awqaf and Religious Affairs of Palestine claims that Israeli forces have damaged or destroyed over 2,000 graves across the territory. Israel's military denies targeting cemeteries intentionally. It says civilian sites, including cemeteries, may inadvertently suffer damage during the war. They justify their actions of destroying cemeteries, saying they are searching for bodies of prisoners. Due to blockades imposed by the Israeli military, many Palestinians in Gaza cannot reach cemeteries and resort to makeshift graveyards. Mass graves have emerged at locations like Al-Shifa Hospital, where rows of bodies are buried. Families are grappling with the distressing desecration of the resting places of their loved ones and are hoping to move their dead once the war concludes. A U.S. federal court has dismissed a case that accused President Joe Biden and other top officials of complicity in Israel's alleged genocide in Gaza. However, the court's ruling urges President Biden and his colleagues to re-evaluate their unwavering support for Israel and its potential human rights implications. U.S. District Court Judge Jeffrey White has ruled that disputes over foreign policy fall outside his jurisdiction. Judge White has also said it is plausible that Israel's actions could amount to genocide. The lawsuit was filed last year by human rights groups and affected Palestinians. It claims that the U.S., as a significant military aid provider to Israel, influences Israel's actions. Despite the dismissal, the plaintiffs see the ruling as a significant step in their efforts to urge the U.S. government to reconsider its support for Israel. The U.S. has imposed sanctions on 4 Israeli settlers in the occupied West Bank. The sanctioned individuals are accused of assaulting and intimidating Palestinians. The sanctions freeze their assets in the U.S. and restrict financial transactions. The White House says settler violence in the West Bank threatens U.S. national security and foreign policy interests. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, however, rejects the sanctions. He says most West Bank settlers are law-abiding citizens. The Biden administration has previously considered sanctions against ultranationalist government ministers. So far, it has not sanctioned any government minister. Critics argue that Israeli authorities seldom hold settlers accountable for their attacks. These attacks have increased considerably since the onset of Israel's war. A senior Arab journalist employed at the BBC Arabic service has been declared a victim of racial harassment by a British employment tribunal. The tribunal found that Ahmed Rouaba faced racial harassment inflicted by his colleague Safa Jabara. Jabara had earlier referred to Rouaba as a violent Bedouin due to his Algerian origin. The tribunal panel unanimously deemed Jabara's remarks derogatory and ruled that he had racially harassed Rouaba. Previously, the BBC had failed to address Jabara's comments. Despite the BBC's claims that Rouaba's grievances were unreasonable, the tribunal dismissed this argument. The tribunal criticized the BBC for failing to investigate Rouaba's complaints properly and plans to hold a preliminary hearing for a remedy. Following the court ruling, the BBC Arabic's management faces calls to review their management practices. A federal task force turned down requests to recognize Jewish and Muslim public servants as distinct groups facing workplace barriers. The CBC reports both communities had sought designation as employment equity groups under the Employment Equity Act nearly 2 years ago. The Jewish Public Service Network requested recognition as both an ethno-cultural and religious group under the Canadian law. The Muslim Federal Employees Network also highlighted ongoing discrimination and socioeconomic barriers faced by Canadian Muslims. The task force has decided not to recommend the creation of a separate category for religious minorities at this time. The task force has, however, committed to further study. For now, it has recommended designating 2S LGBTQI+ and Black workers as employment equity groups. Final decisions rest with the Labour Minister, Seamus O'Regan, who may consider further changes to the Employee Equity Act. The Committee to Protect Journalists says 83 journalists and media workers have been tragically killed in Israel's war on Palestine. 76 of these casualties are Palestinians, 4 Israelis, and 3 Lebanese. To commemorate the death of these journalists, a vigil was held yesterday in Toronto. The event was organized by journalists for journalists. The vigil was not publicly announced and kept private to create a safe space for journalists. The gathering was meant to serve as a collective moment for reflection and a reaffirmation of Canada's commitment to press freedoms both locally and globally. Amongst the speakers was the niece of Shireen Abu Akleh, a Palestinian-American journalist who was shot and killed by an Israeli sniper. Janila Massa, a Muslim television journalist, was also amongst the speakers. Thank you for watching. Our news is produced by Muslim Network TV, which is a not-for-profit organization. We need your support for donations. Please scan the QR code on our broadcast or visit muslimnetwork.tv to donate now so we can continue to amplify the voices of Muslims in Canada and abroad. Assalamu alaikum.